everyone, welcome back to the You're Not Finished podcast. My name is Brittany Franklin, and I'm the host of this podcast. Really excited to bring you another installment, segment. I don't know the word to use right now. Sorry, but I'm going to say installment for right now. Another installment of the What Keeps You Alive series. I want to just restate this, or maybe I don't know if I've said this before. I probably have, but just to make things clear, I want people to understand that the What Keeps You Alive series is not something to be used as a means of spiritually bypassing anything or ignoring reality or as a means of escape. I don't ever intend it to be anything like that, especially when I want to make it a point to acknowledge that there are a lot of terrible things going on in the world right now, especially here in America. Well, I won't say especially in America as if to center America, like it's more important than any other nation in our world, but that's where I currently am right now. And so there's a lot of things that are affecting Americans, and the current administration is doing things that affect the rest of the world as well. So I don't ever want to make it seem like I'm ignoring things, the evil, the unjust, the demonic things that are going on here in America. What I do want to use the What Keeps You Alive series for is to help people who are struggling with suicidal ideation find and continuously put their hope in and their focus on things that are lovely, right, praiseworthy, true, honorable, and of good rapport. Things that will help them keep going despite everything that's going on in the world. This has also been really helpful for me, as I've mentioned before, as someone who struggles with suicidal ideation, to actively be looking for those things for myself so that I can use my experiences and whatever it is that I know to help others. That's really what this is for. It's to attempt to be at least, a light in the midst of darkness. Not to exalt myself or anything like that, because that is definitely not what I'm doing. I don't even really like attention on myself like that, if I'm being honest. But we are called to be lights of the world as Christians. And so I just want to be obedient, regardless of whether one person is listening to this or 100 people decide they want to listen to this. So that's what the What Keeps You Alive series is all about. And today is going to be another short episode, which I'm happy about for us both. As you can see, the title, Role versus Identity. And the reason why this is something that keeps me alive is because I was reminded of a past experience that actually is used as a lesson for me. And I think it's something that can give others a different perspective and something to help them pursue life, help you pursue life, whoever's listening. So when I was in high school, I played basketball. In the ninth grade, I started off playing as a shooting guard, developing my confidence as someone who is on junior varsity and things like that. And towards the end of the season, I felt my confidence rise to a level that I had never been at before. I had played basketball pretty much every year of my life up until that point. And so I felt like at that point, at the end of the junior varsity season, or towards the end of the junior varsity season, rather, my confidence was at its peak, even though our team record was not that great, if I'm being real. But we had a good team at the end of the day. And I feel like if we would have kept our team together, then maybe it could have developed into something stronger. But it doesn't matter. That's like 1,200 years ago, right? So, anyways, one day I go to school and some players of the varsity team are like, "Oh, so I heard you're going to help us out, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I didn't know that the varsity coach had been talking to the varsity players about bringing me up because one of the players got injured, which normally that would be good news. And at the time, I thought it was cool, not really thinking like I'm 13, 14 years old. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to varsity. That's cool. The problem with that was I wasn't being brought up into a shooting guard position. I was being brought up into a power forward center position because of my height. So I had no real experience of playing this position, and now I was expected to fill a role that I didn't have a lot of experience in. That shaped my entire high school career almost, because I went from averaging maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 12 or something points per game to maybe like 2, 4. And my primary role was defensive and supportive in nature. And as someone who grew up as an only child in a single parent household, you learn to be adaptable and not make too many objections. But I knew personally that I was struggling, but there wasn't anybody I can really communicate that to because this was the role that I was in. And I'm a kid. And like, what can you say to an adult coach other than, I quit the team, right? You can't be like, I want to go back to JV. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, anyways, I didn't get confident in my power forward slash center role until literally the end of my senior season. While I improved, I realized as an adult that I put in work into a role that I never was supposed to fill. Even though it helped the team, we won league championships, we got to playoffs and things like that. And it was great having that supporting role and being a team player. I now understand that there are times where and seasons where you could be playing a role to the detriment of your growth and to the denial of your identity. I wouldn't say I wasted time because I think it was helpful, but who knows what kind of player I would have been if I would have continued to grow in the role that I was growing in confidence in based on my identity and what I'm naturally able to do as a player. Things like that experience translated on later on into life where I would always be like, even in the workplace, and even now, if I'm being honest, actually up until recently, where I would always say, oh, I just want to go where the need is, which sometimes that's true. Sometimes you have to do that. There are times where you're just going to have to sacrifice at the end of the day to fill a specific need, especially if the need contributes to a greater good. But it's never at the expense of who you're created to be. And I think that, or it's never supposed to be. And so I, again, up until recently, have always sought to fill a need, to supply a need, to serve in whatever capacity, to be valuable more often than not at the expense of who I'm created to be in order to receive temporary human acceptance, to get a congratulations, to get the good job, to get the acknowledgement. And I'm at a point in life where I don't care. I won't say don't care because some things you want acknowledgement for. But I refuse to put myself in positions where I know that I'm just a role filler for someone, especially if it's at the expense of who I am in Christ. What I have learned is that It's not your role or title that determines whether you have identity in Christ or not. I think a lot of times, especially in Christianity and especially in like prosperity teaching, we see that success equals, or we learn that in those settings, success equals closeness to God. However, in the kingdom, it's flipped. Your identity in Christ should influence the roles that you have here on earth, because your identity in Christ is forever and your roles are temporary. And your identity in Christ, I won't say guarantees success, but maybe, right? Especially if it's pleasing to God and you're operating in that identity and you're operating under submission and obedience to God, your identity in Christ will lead to victory in Him. I'll say it like that. And that victory isn't determined by how other people, how humanity perceives your successes and your victories. It's not determined by how many followers you have. It's not determined by how many degrees you might have. It's not determined by how many kids you have, how long you've been married. None of those things. How much money you have, none of those things. While those things are blessings, again, they're temporary. But your identity is eternal. Once we understand our identities in Christ, we have a greater understanding and discernment of what roles we need to accept, where we need to go in obedience and submission to God, who we need to serve. And it might be difficult at times, but we understand, again, especially if we continue to fix our eyes on the things that are above and the things that are right, true, lovely, praiseworthy, pure, of good report. If we focus on those things in our identity in Christ, while having good community around us to remind us of our identity in Christ when we forget, we will be satisfied with what we're doing here on earth. We will be satisfied with who we are, knowing that will continue to give us the will to live. Again, that's not saying that things won't be difficult at times. But I've said this before. I believe I've said this before in other podcast episodes, but I'll say it again. Trouble is promised, but so is victory over those troubles. So knowing our identity in Christ is so much more important than knowing our role in this world. In the kingdom mindset, our identity in Christ determines what our role would be. Whether we're content in that role or not, that's a completely different story. And that's something that, some of us might have to work on, deal with through God, through therapy, through wise counsel, and all of the things, right? But our identity takes precedence over our role. One thing I read last night that really helped me understand this was from Romans 8. And I want to read this really quickly to you before I get out of here. This is from Romans 8, verses 10 through 17. This is from the New King James Version. As per usual, I usually read from that version, but it says, "And if Christ is in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the spirit of life is because of righteousness. But if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. If indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. First and foremost, as a child with abandonment issues, if I'm being for real, when I read, but you received the spirit of adoption, that immediately, I even prayed last night, thank you so much for giving us a home. You are a father to the fatherless. Because I know that if I'm thinking from the place of being abandoned, from a place of thinking I have to prove something to someone, to prove my worth to people, I'm going to operate in the flesh. I'm going to pursue titles. I'm going to pursue money. I'm going to pursue, I don't know, clout, whatever the case may be. I'm going to pursue power, right? And a form of godliness that's not really God. I'm going to pursue those things if I operate from a spirit of abandonment, if I operate from a need to seek approval from man in the form of success, worldly success and titles, right? However, if I operate from the spirit of adoption, I mean, what does it say, right? It says, but if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you. I will live by his spirit. But if I pursue the flesh, I'm going to die. Why? Because those things I'm pursuing are temporary. They will die, and so will I. Once those titles go away, once that affirmation from man, whether that's genuine or not, once that goes away, then I'm more likely to go away. So it's important to focus on living by the Spirit, living from a place of knowing our identity as adopted children and heirs of God. I want to clarify too before I cut this off that having a role isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, especially if you're contributing to something that is to the betterment of others and yourself and to the glory of God. But you have to ask yourself, we have to ask ourselves, is that role coming from a place that is assigned by man's standards, by our insecurities and doubts about ourselves, from fear, from oppression, from control, from lies of the enemy? Or is it coming from having an identity in Christ? So just to wrap it up neatly and put it in a bow real quick. What keeps me alive is knowing that I no longer have to play a role that's been assigned to me by other people. I don't have to accept who I've always been. I can grow and move forward, especially now knowing the truth about my identity in Christ and continuing to know Christ for myself and his word. I can confidently say no to things that do not align with my identity in Christ. Does that mean that it doesn't get lonely sometimes? Does that mean that I don't stress or get depressed sometimes? Of course not. But because I have an understanding of my identity in Christ, I can lean on him, I can lean on his word, I can lean into the truth and hang on to that hope that will keep me going. Hang on to that light, hang on to that truth, despite a world filled with darkness. Today, while I was doing laundry, I thought this for the first time in a really long time. I thought this exact thought that no matter how hard things get here in America and in life, I want to live. That's coming from a person who has 2 suicide attempts and struggles with suicidal ideation. No matter what, I want to see where this goes. I want to see where knowing my identity in Christ leads me to, who it connects me to. I'm hopeful, which is crazy for me to say. Like, I mean, it's not that crazy, but like, if anybody who knows my history, and obviously I know myself and the things that I've dealt with, especially in regards to depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation, me saying that is huge. I don't just want to survive anymore. I don't just want to make it to the next day anymore. I don't just want to escape. I want to push through every obstacle that stands in front of me, and I want to live. And I want that for everyone who is listening to this, whether they are a believer or not, whether you are a believer or not. I want life for you. I want you to have life in Christ. I want you to have hope. I want you to be able to access things that you, basic things that you're entitled to in life, like food and shelter and provision and a safe community, contentment. I want people to be able to pursue the things that they're called to do, despite any hindrances that might be put in front of them or in front of you, in front of us. So that is all I have for today's episode. If you are struggling with mental distress, mental illness, suicidal ideation, or addiction, please feel free to head over to you'renotfinished.com and click the Get Help section, and you will find a directory of resources for you. There's also a couple of faith-based resources for you there as well. If you want a practical resource for you, I do have an 8-day devotional that you can download for free called You're Not Finished, Using Stories of Survival to Save Lives. You can download that on Gumroad. Just enter 0 into the price box. Or if you would like to donate anything, you can pay what you want. That's fine. However, finances should not be a hindrance for anybody. And so if you would like to download that, head over to the you'renotfinished.com website and click the Devo link to find out how you can get either the PDF version for free, or if you need a physical copy, you want a physical copy, you can get a spiral bound version on Lulu. Also, if you are a woman or a young lady who would like a tool that will help you overcome addiction and dependence on pornography and self-stimulation, you can check out You're Not Finished, From False Intimacy to Freedom. That's also at the You're Not Finished website. You can learn more about what that entails, and the spiral bound version is available on Lulu as well. You can also buy a copy on Amazon. I hope this episode was as encouraging to you as it was for me. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day and finish well.